video out to the team. And now we have a view from our helicopter of the landing location. You can see the sample return capsule dead center on your screen, that kind of dark gray black object right there. And then just to the right of it, a little bit below, is our parachute. It appears to be resting on the surface. We're getting a zoom in now from our NASA helicopter. And you can see now the SRC. At last, we have a visual of it on the surface of the Utah Test and Training Range. I'm sure that is a pleasant sight for the team to see.
Recovery operations. Helo 2 has visual on the SRC. I repeat, SRC has been located.
And we have visual on that SRC. It appears that the parachute has also disconnected. It's a little bit off from that SRC, disconnecting from the back shell. The SRC appears to be resting on its nose, that heat shield that protected it the whole way down through that entry, descent, and landing. Lockheed is celebrating that moment. I'm sure they are breathing another sigh of relief here. It's been a wild morning for everyone involved. They've been up since the crack of dawn, just a little bit further north from us in Waterton, Colorado. They gave the go command to actually release that SRC that you see on your screen right there from the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft about 4 hours ago. It then ventured entirely on its own and now sits on its own for us here in the Utah Test and Training Range. So now that we have visual, the teams should be able to begin the recovery operations in just a few moments. As I mentioned, that first person on scene will be the on-scene commander, Stu Wiley. He'll be doing an environmental sweep. We're getting a nice close-up view. You can see the parachute disconnected. You can see some of the wiring of it there, just a little bit off the edge of our SRC. The SRC looks quite charred up from that entry in. That was expected, as we heated up to temperatures over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit upon entry into Earth's atmosphere. You can see a great visual of some of that rugged terrain out there. Just a sweeping expanse, very panoramic terrain at the Utah Test and Training Range. It's a great location for us to land this sample. The team looking a lot more relieved now that we actually have visual. And we should be able to begin those recovery operations shortly. Inside that sample return capsule are pieces of the asteroid Bennu. We'll be getting access to those samples in just a few days and actually seeing exactly what we got from the asteroid regolith. This mission continues to amaze me and everyone involved here. The engineering is ingenious for this mission, getting us with a robotic explorer to the edge of the solar system, collecting that sample, safely stowing it, and then actually transporting it back here to Earth for us to open up and analyze. The surface today was probably a little bit soft, so it looks like it's resting a little bit far off the actual desert. It doesn't appear to have dug in too much with that nose cone from the heat shield. You are here with us as we witness this historic moment. It's the first time the United States has delivered samples from an asteroid to Earth. And these samples will be analyzed for decades to come in laboratories around the world. And there is landing of our first helicopter at the site. Appears to have a nice soft landing. We're just probably a couple hundred feet.
Recovery operations. Helo 1 has landed at the recovery site.
So our first helicopter, you just heard confirmation, and you can see visual confirmation of that landing. We're maybe about 100, 200 feet away, landing away from that sample. So a little bit of a hike for our team members to get out to that sample return capsule and begin our environmental safety sweep. As I mentioned, our on-scene commander, Stu Wiley, will be the first person of the team to actually approach this sample, check the area for any unexploded ordnances, UXOs, that could possibly be out there on the range, and then also make sure that that SRC is safe for our operations team to approach and begin recovery. You can see where that parachute disconnected from the top of that SRC. That is the back shield that you see right there at the very top with that little bit of white wiring still coming out of the top. Our SRC perfectly landed there on the Utah Test and Training Range. So what you're about to see happening next is the process of recovery operations. This is a key moment of today's events to actually get that SRC from out in the desert into our portable clean room here at Dugway. It is crucial that we maintain the pristine nature of this sample that we got back from Asteroid Bennu. It could hold the clues to how everything around us came to be, from the formation of the planets to origins of life here, so the team understands just how crucial the contents of that SRC is, and they're going to work as efficiently and as safely as possible to get that SRC contained, wrapped up in thermal blanketing, placed in a sample carrying fixture, and then attached with long line to our first helicopter there. It'll then be transported the long journey back here, a much more relaxing flight, I'm sure, for our SRC, to our portable clean room at Dugway. At which point the team members will extract the back shell and remove the heat shield from the SRC. It served its purpose. We're mainly now concerned with getting the contents within that sample canister containing pieces of the asteroid regolith out of that SRC. We won't actually, as I mentioned, be opening that sample canister just yet here at Dugway. The team is simply focused on getting that SRC, or the sample canister rather, on a nitrogen purge, and this is to maintain that pristine nature and prevent any kind of contaminants from the atmosphere from getting into our sample within.
Recovery operations. Kilos 3 and 4 have been cleared to land at the recovery site.
And the rest of the team is closely behind, ready to land at the recovery site to begin operations. This will be simultaneous action that you'll see here once we have the clearance from Stu Wiley to begin our recovery operations. At least from this perspective, I'm not noticing really any drag marks or any kind of roll marks, but the team, once they approach, will mark any possible areas of interest where the SRC possibly came in contact with the rough desert terrain. All of these regions will be sampled by our recovery team and will be passed off to the sample curation team at the Johnson Space Center. As they begin to unload and actually open up the sample canister there, exploring the contents within and making sure that no possible contaminants from the surrounding landing location got into our sample. We're getting a wider view now. We should have the helicopters that have landed nearby coming into view, potentially. The team really taking extra precaution as they approach the SRC. As I mentioned, team member safety is paramount during these operations. There are possible potential areas of concern as the team begin these operations, including the temperature of that SRC. You see it looks quite charred there. It could still be a little bit warm. As I mentioned, it heated up to over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So as the cool desert air begins to cool down that SRC, we want to make sure that it is cool enough for our team to actually begin those recovery operations. We'll also be checking the gas levels of that SRC to make sure that it is not outgassing from the batteries within, heating up during that reentry. We'll also be making sure that there is no live voltage present. And we see a view now from our high altitude plane that has visual of those helicopters landed nearby, just at the northern part of your screen. You can see one of them on screen now. The top of your screen there, it is centered up. There is our helicopter, and it appears that we have our on-scene commander potentially walking over. This is once again our high altitude WB-57 shot of our helicopters landed at the LZ, our landing zone. You can see some movement on the screen. It appears some team members might be approaching our SRC at this point to begin those recovery operations, the initial safety sweep. We'll just be observing from this high altitude for the next coming minutes, as the team actually will be setting up a camera on the ground for us to observe the recovery operations close up. And a note from one of the team members about the SRC itself. So they have approximately 40 hours. That is the amount of time it would take for any air to get into the sample. As I mentioned before, that sample return capsule is a complex network of piping and tubing inside of it, sort of like a labyrinth-like design, and that is intentional to make it incredibly difficult for any possible contaminants from the atmosphere to get into our sample canister. It's also sort of like a nesting doll, if you will, where it has multiple layers of protection that keep that sample safe within. All of that protective layering, once we get that sample into the clean room, will be shed, and we'll be able to actually access that sample canister within. The main goal, as I said, for today is to get that sample canister on a nitrogen purge. That is to maintain its pristine nature. And we have visual once again from one of our helicopters here orbiting around the landing location. You can see our SRC at the bottom left of your screen and its parachute that helped us get the last leg of the journey down. It deployed a little bit higher than we expected, 20,000 feet elevation. Original expectation was at about 5,000 feet. And this brought us down the last leg of the journey after a punishing initial entry into Earth's atmosphere over San Francisco, about 82 miles in altitude, to now resting on the rugged Utah Test and Training Range desert floor.
Recovery operations. Recovery team is in the vicinity, beginning their initial assessments.
So you just heard confirmation from Tim Preiser that the team is beginning to actually approach the SRC for that initial environmental and safety sweep. You'll soon see our on-scene commander, Oscar, Stu Wiley, approaching that sample return capsule. As I mentioned before, he'll be checking for any possible unexploded ordnances. You can see our mission operations team. They have been overseeing all of this morning's events, and they're going to continue. There we go. On screen, you can see front and center there, Stu Wiley, our on-scene commander, and right behind him is Victoria team. They are both wearing personal protective equipment, gas masks. That's for their own safety as they approach, as there could be potential outgassing from that sample return capsule's batteries heating up during reentry. You can see him scanning the region. He's checking for any possible unexploded ordnances, UXOs.
Recovery operations. Oscar is performing the unexploded ordnance survey.
And you just heard that he is, in fact, doing that survey right now. You can see him walking around the SRC. This is the first person to come in contact with this SRC since it was on the other side of the solar system. We had sent this on a long journey, the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. Finally delivering the sample, he is motioning over to Victoria team, who is surely going to approach and begin taking some gas and thermal readings. You can see her walking over and must have given the clear for her to proceed. A little bit closer. Stu continues to pace around the surrounding area. All over here, the team will collect samples. He'll begin to place flags. You can see in his backpack, he's got a couple flags waving in the breeze. Those will be placed at areas of interest for our team members to sample once they arrive and begin those recovery operations. Victoria is now appearing to take out her thermal and gas reading devices. She's taking an initial thermal reading of that SRC as we speak, looking for it to be at an operational temperature of around 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Operations. Lockheed Martin Safety is performing hazardous environment assessments.
And you just heard that confirmation. So she is performing that hazardous environment assessment, checking the thermal temperature of that SRC, as well as taking any kind of gas readings to make sure that we are at safe operational levels. She is also leading over. This is Victoria team from Lockheed Martin. Stu continues to sweep the area around her for the safe operation of our recovery crew members. There are several nozzles, valves around the SRC, and so once Victoria has the clear to approach, she'll actually open up some of those valves and insert a gas reading device within to actually take some temperatures. And you can see off to the left of your screen, Stu Wiley is actually safing and stowing away that parachute that helped take us the last leg of the journey. It's great news that that disconnected from the SRC. That allowed our SRC to rest as it is now here on the surface of the Utah Test and Training Range. It appears with minimal dragging.
Recovery operations. Oscar is safing and storing the main parachute.
So Stu is going to get that parachute stowed, placed away, as Victoria is front and center on your screen, beginning to take some of those gas readings to make sure that we are not outgassing any kind of noxious chemicals that could be present from that battery heating up within the SRC. And Stu is walking back to the team with that parachute. So the SRC battery is comprised of lithium disulfide, and as such, the possibility of toxic vapors exists if the battery packaging has been damaged during entry or landing. Discharging could cause potential presence of hydrogen sulfide from those batteries heating up, or carbon monoxide. And so that is why Victoria initially had her gas mask on. It appears she has now actually taken it off, so it appears that the gas readings indicate nominal conditions.
Recovery operations, Lockheed Martin Safety has confirmed no hazardous gas.
And you just heard that confirmation, so the safety assessment is successful. Victoria has confirmed that with her gas readings and thermal measurements of the SRC. They'll then go back over, Stu and Victoria, for a team huddle to prepare the rest of the team to begin the recovery operations and actually get this SRC into our clean room here at Dugway and continue the operations. You can see the Lockheed Martin team in the bottom left of your screen, just overjoyed with this moment. This is years of careful planning and preparation leading to this final phase of getting that sample back here to our clean rooms. I'm sure they've been holding their breath all morning, so they're getting closer to finally being able to take another breath and relax as we actually will begin our recovery operations, a key part of today's events. And you might see Victoria approach over and over once again to that SRC to continue to take gas readings. At this point, she appears to be covering up the back shell of that SRC, placing a Teflon cover over. This is where the parachute actually deployed at the top of the SRC capsule, the sample return capsule rather. She'll also be checking for any possible live voltage. And we'll wrap Kapton tape around the two cut cable ends protruding from the back of the SRC where that parachute deployed. You can see her with that covering as we speak, placing it on the back shell. And she has successfully placed that shielding on the back, that Teflon cover. Stu walking around behind, checking the rest of the scene, walking back with the parachute that he now has safely stowed away. And you'll see Victoria opening up a couple gas valves on the SRC, taking those gas readings. Continue to do this throughout the whole process. She's also placing covers on those gas vents too to prevent any kind of contamination from atmospheric particles, particulates entering into that SRC. She's photographing the scene as well too. This is to keep careful note of exactly the procedures that she's going through for her team. So the recovery operations will be getting underway shortly now that the team has conducted their initial environmental and safety sweep. Everything appears to be nominal, which is fantastic. We do, in fact, have that SRC on the ground. The rest of the team will be approaching shortly. And so while we've been kind of waiting for the past couple of minutes here, the team has actually successfully bagged and prepared the sample return capsule for the long line operations. You can see on your screen right now, the SRC is bagged within thermal blanketing, and that metal thing you see on the bottom is the carrying fixture. This will then be actually loaded up into cargo netting and prepared for long line operations. One of our helicopters will take flight, carrying the SRC dangling beneath it. The SRC is going to be stabilized with that cargo netting. There is a gimbal that will keep it stable as we begin the flight to the clean room with our precious cargo on board. You'll notice a couple of tape markers on that SRC as well, the thermal blanketing there. Those are pieces of Kapton tape marking exactly where vents are on that SRC for team members here at the clean room, who will once again do gas and thermal readings once it arrives at the clean room. Just once again making sure team members are safe and secure as we begin to continue those recovery operations, getting the SRC into the clean room. And this is one of the last phases of the process of getting our SRC back and then opening it up, finally seeing that sample canister within and preparing that for shipment tomorrow on a C-17 cargo plane to the Johnson Space Center's sample curation facility. And this was a very quick process. I mean, if you're keeping time at home, this was only maybe about 20 minutes that they took to get out there once they arrived and wrap everything up really quickly once they were given the official confirmation to approach, get everything stored, prepared for those long line operations. This really has become second nature for these team members. They really are able to bag and prepare this SRC, and you'll see still quite a few flags around that area there. Once this SRC is flown away from the region, the landing zone, team members from the curation team will remain on site and continue to take samples of that surrounding area. They also have set up Off screen here, you can't see it, but there is a air reading that they're going to be taking actual air samples of the area, atmospheric samples. All of this will be cross-correlated with samples that we actually get back from the asteroid Bennu to make sure that nothing from Earth here at the LZ or beyond got into that sample return capsule. And you can see some of those team members who are going to be taking those samples once again approaching the location. Dante Loretta is front and center with them. He has that armband on, and on his left arm, you can see it there, as he's carrying his bucket that has all of his tools that he needs to begin collecting these samples. It's a very tight procedure that they have to go through to make sure that they are properly taking these samples. You can see they are photographing the area first, documenting exactly where they are collecting the sample from. They then have a small metal scooper that they'll use to actually dig into the desert surface. It's a bit of a soft surface out there today. As I mentioned, we did have some rain that softened it up, so it should be easy to dig in there, grab a bit of sample, and then they will bag that sample, seal it up, and then send that off to the sample curation team at the Johnson Space Center. Admiring the region as well. It's a beautiful, clear morning there today. We've been rehearsing in a variety of different conditions, including in the middle of the summer where temperatures were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, much cooler conditions. You can see our team members wearing their UV shirts today. A much chillier morning for them as they are doing these recovery operations. And this process does take some time as they go through and collect these samples. They want to make sure that they are accurately documenting exactly what's present at this landing zone for the team members who are at the sample curation facility of the Johnson Space Center. We're getting a great aerial view from our NASA helicopter. They've been doing a phenomenal job all morning tracking the action for us, and we don't give them enough credit. We've been training, obviously, all of the science and
recovery operations. The recovery team is moving the SRC to Helicopter 1 and preparing for long line operations.
And there we have it. We are going to be moving towards those long line operations. The rest of the team members approaching that SRC that has been successfully bagged and prepared to be loaded into the helicopter's long line. This will be the last time the SRC takes flight. We had a wild flight this morning. You can see two team members lifting that SRC up. It's about 120 pounds total once you have the SRC and the carrying fixture there together. They're going to be walking this over, preparing it for cargo netting, and getting that attached to the long line for helicopter operations. And as I mentioned, this is the last time the SRC is going to be taking flight. It had a harrowing journey this morning coming through the Earth's atmosphere at over 27,000 miles per hour. It is now being carried carefully by a couple team members here. So quite a deceleration from that initial entry, and really just a wonderful final journey for our sample before it is opened up at the clean room and prepared to be shipped to this to the curation facility at Johnson. And as I mentioned, this view is coming from one of our NASA helicopters. Just like the science and engineering teams have been preparing for this key moment, our NASA helicopter pilots have also been preparing to cover today's events. They're typically down at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, capturing launch coverage from Cape Canaveral. But this past couple months, they've been out here with us at the Utah Test and Training Range, preparing to document today's events, getting incredible footage for us all along the way. You can see those team members have a bit of a hike to carry it to where it is safe operationally. And you can see we have the cargo netting already laid out there. Our representative from Dugway, Jasmine Nakayama, is prepared with that cargo netting. She's going to help the team here get that SRC that has already been successfully bagged up with thermal wrapping into that cargo netting, and you can see the helicopter already there staged and ready to lift off. The helicopter pilot has actually removed one of the doors on that helicopter so he can lean out and look down as he carefully lifts the SRC off the terrain. We want to make sure that this is a careful, slow process as we safely transport this SRC to the Dugway clean room. And you can see Jasmine is picking up pieces of the cargo netting and beginning to wrap the SRC that has been placed already on the carrying fixture with the thermal blanketing. Team members observing their handiwork of getting that carefully wrapped up. We'll then actually unwrap all of that thermal blanketing once we actually get it into the clean room here.
Recovery operations. SRC is in the cargo net. and all the gear has been stowed in the helicopter.
Great news. Everything sounds nominal for helicopter operations, and in just a few moments we should have liftoff of that SRC aboard the helicopter with that long line attached. Team members clearing the area to make sure that we can safely take off with our helicopter. These helicopter pilots have also been training in tandem with all the team members the past couple months leading up to this key moment. We've practiced these long line operations. We've practiced the flight back to the dugway clean room. But obviously nothing compares to the real deal. I'm sure they are feeling the excitement. They are feeling the nerves as they know how precious their cargo is this morning that they're transporting to the dugway clean room. See, Jasmine is donning a helmet, and the rotors are kicking on for our helicopter. Kicking off some dust as they get up to speed there. It is a dusty morning out on the desert. And this will be, once again, a very slow, deliberate operation. We want to make sure that sample return capsule is safe as we are lifting it off. The piece that Jasmine is holding in her hand right now is that gimbal stabilizer for the cargo netting. That will ensure that the SRC is not wildly spinning as we get to altitude with our helicopter. These helicopters can get upwards of over 100 miles an hour speed, but we're going to go nowhere close to that today. We're going to be taking this at a slow pace, making sure that SRC can get back safely and securely to our dugway clean room. You can see one of our NASA photographers, Keegan Barber, taking some great pictures. I'm sure those will be phenomenal views of the operations that are going on just across the way from us at the Utah Test and Training Range. As soon as these rotors get up to speed, our helicopter will get off the ground. The terrain is a little bit soft today. Team members were out here yesterday testing out the grounds and had practiced actually landing with some of the helicopters. Those skids on the helicopters got about an inch into the wet terrain. It's presumably dried a lot more today. It's the sunny, clear skies have probably helped us out a bit, so this should be an easy liftoff for this helicopter to get into the air and help transport that SRC to the clean room. Off-screen, team members are presumably continuing to collect samples of the surrounding area, both environmental, soil samples, atmospheric samples. We'll be continuing to do those operations even as we bring this SRC to our clean room. Just a great view here from our NASA helicopter. And in just a few moments, we should have a stunning view of our SRC lifting off the ground. No part of this SRC comes in contact with the helicopter. As I said, it's been safely stored in that thermal blanketing. There's multiple layers of that blanketing, as well as a tarp being placed over it. Now, it is also in that cargo netting, thanks to our dugway representative, Jasmine Nakayama. She's then attached this whole contraption to a long line that will dangle about 100 feet below the helicopter. And I can see a lot of dust kicking up now. The engine's really revving up on that helicopter, and it is off the desert terrain in the air with the SRC in tow.
Recovery operations. Helicopter 1 is cleared to depart the recovery site with the SRC.
And we have clearance to depart the recovery site. This is a key moment of those recovery operations. We're already getting that SRC out of the landing zone and on its way to the dugway clean room. In just a few moments, that SRC with the long line attached will be lifting off its landing zone. Jasmine assisting with that final part of the lift, and it is now airborne. As I mentioned, a much more relaxing flight for our SRC on its last leg of its journey. We are officially departing that landing zone. Recovery operations will continue out at the dugway clean room. I see team members waving goodbye. And look at that view. This is a stunning view of our helicopter. This is a long journey ahead. As I mentioned, probably about 20 minutes of total flight time. We may lose signal as we head out there a bit, but for now we have a stunning view of our helicopter carrying the SRC below. And you can see that stabilizer is helping to keep that SRC nice and stable below.